The night was silent. Only the cold wind touched the walls of the small human outpost. Inside, Daniel sat alone by the heater, staring at the flickering light. His hands were rough from work, his eyes heavy from endless patrols. For many months he had lived on this alien world, far away from Earth. He had grown used to the silence, to the emptiness, and to the loneliness. But that night, something strange broke the silence. Knock, knock. The sound was soft, almost like a ghost at the door. Daniel froze. Who would come here at this hour? Nobody visited his outpost, not in the middle of the freezing desert night. He reached for the old rifle by his chair, then slowly stood up. The knock came again, louder this time, more desperate. Who's there? Daniel shouted. His voice echoed in the empty corridor. No answer. Only silence. He stepped closer, heart pounding. When he finally opened the heavy steel door, the wind rushed in, and with it a figure. A woman. No, not a human woman. She was alien. Her skin glowed faintly in the moonlight, pale and silver blue. Her hair fell in tangled strands, wet from frost. Her clothes were torn, her arms trembling as she clutched a bundle to her chest. Her eyes, large and luminous, looked at him with fear and hope. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Human, I need shelter." Daniel gripped his rifle tighter. He had seen aliens before, but never like this. She was not armed. She was not hostile. She looked broken, like a bird with shattered wings. "What do you want?" he asked carefully. The woman lowered her head. From the bundle she held, a soft sound came, a child's cry. Daniel's eyes widened as he realized she was not alone. Wrapped in the cloth were two small alien children, their bodies shivering from the cold. "They are my children," she said. "We have nowhere else to go." Daniel's chest tightened. He had fought wars against alien tribes. He had seen soldiers fall. But here there was no war. Only a widow standing on his doorstep in the middle of the night begging for help. The wind howled, pushing against the door. The children whimpered louder. Daniel felt a battle inside himself, between caution and compassion. He knew letting her in might bring trouble. Maybe she was a trap. Maybe soldiers followed behind her. But if he left her outside, the children would not survive the night. "Come inside," he said finally. The woman's eyes filled with tears of relief. She stepped in quickly, clutching the children close. Daniel shut the door behind them and locked it. The heater filled the room with warmth, and the children reached toward it, their small hands shaking. Daniel poured some hot water into a cup and handed it to her. She sipped slowly, her lips trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. For a long moment there was silence, only the crackle of the heater and the soft breaths of the children. Daniel studied her carefully. Her face was beautiful in a strange, alien way. Not fragile, there was strength in her eyes, but a deep sadness too. Finally he spoke. "Why are you here?" She looked at him, then lowered her gaze. "Because my children need a father." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. The words hung heavy in the air. He didn't know whether to laugh, to get angry, or to feel pity. "You don't even know me," he said slowly. The widow's voice cracked, but her eyes held firm. "I know you are human, and humans protect. I saw you once in the village. You gave food to a starving child. You did not look away. That is why I am here." Daniel leaned back, stunned. He remembered the day she spoke of. He had thought no one noticed. But she had. The woman pulled her children closer, as if shielding them from the world. "Please," she whispered. "If you send us away, they will die. If you take us in, maybe they will live." The heater glowed. Daniel's rifle lay silent against the wall. Outside, the storm grew stronger, but inside the room, an even greater storm began to form, one inside Daniel's heart. Because at that moment, he knew his life was about to change forever. The storm outside grew louder through the night, but inside Daniel's outpost, a heavier silence pressed down. The alien widow sat close to the heater, her children curled beside her, finally asleep. Their tiny chests rose and fell, their breaths uneven from cold and hunger. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, staring at her. His mind spun with questions. Who was she? Where was her tribe? Why had she come here? And why had she said those strange words, "My children need a father"? She felt his eyes and finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "My name is Lyra," she said. Daniel nodded once but kept quiet. "I lived in the northern village," she continued. "When the raiders came, they killed my husband. They burned everything. We ran, but..." Her voice broke. She pulled her shawl tighter around herself. We lost everyone. Daniel clenched his jaw. He had heard rumors of raiders, merciless bands that cared for nothing but plunder. Human or alien, it made no difference to them, but still he did not lower his guard. You walked through the desert in this storm? With children? Daniel asked, his voice sharper than he meant. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wet but fearless. When you are a mother, you don't count the miles. You only count the breaths your children still take. The words hit him harder than he expected. He remembered his own mother on Earth long ago, holding his hand through winters, protecting him when food was scarce. His chest ached at the memory. Daniel sighed and rubbed his forehead. You said something strange about needing a father. Lyra lowered her gaze. Her hand gently stroked the heads of her children as she answered. A home is not only walls and fire. A home needs someone strong to protect it, someone who stands when danger comes. My children have no one left. If they grow without a protector, they will not survive. Daniel frowned. So you want me to, what? Pretend to be their father? Her eyes met his again, steady and unflinching. Not pretend be, the heater crackled. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had fought battles, faced death many times, but this was something he had no training for. Lyra, I'm not the man you think I am, he said finally. I'm no savior. I'm just a soldier left behind on a cold world. She gave the smallest, saddest smile. Then you are exactly what we need. A soldier knows how to fight. A soldier knows how to endure. That is more than most men here. Daniel looked at the children, their small bodies pressed together for warmth. Something inside him shifted. Something he thought he had buried long ago. He had sworn never to get close to anyone again. War had taken too much already. But here, in his lonely outpost, life had knocked at his door. Still he shook his head. If I protect you, the raiders might come for me too. They don't spare anyone. Her voice was almost a whisper now. They already follow us. Even if you send us away, they will come here. The question is not if you fight, but when. Daniel's blood ran cold. He straightened, his soldier's instincts firing awake. They tracked you here? Lyra nodded slowly. I tried to lose them, but they will not stop. They hunt widows and children. We are easy prey. Daniel's hand went to his rifle resting near the wall. The thought of enemies coming to his door filled him with grim determination. For the first time in months, he felt alive. Not just surviving. Fighting for something real. Lyra's eyes softened. She reached out and touched his hand, just a brief touch warm against his cold skin. You are human, she said. Humans are different. That is why I chose your door. Daniel pulled his hand back, uneasy but shaken. He looked out the small window. The storm howled, but in the distance he thought he saw faint lights, moving, flickering like torches cutting through the night. His breath caught. The raiders were closer than he imagined. Inside the outpost, the children slept peacefully, unaware of the danger marching toward them. And Daniel realized, with a heavy heart, that his choice had already been made the moment he opened the door. The outpost walls shook under the force of the storm. Wind howled through every crack, but Daniel's eyes were not on the weather. He stood at the narrow window, his rifle gripped tightly in his hands. Beyond the swirling snow and dust, faint lights moved like restless ghosts. Torches. The raiders were coming. Behind him, Lyra placed a blanket over her children. They stirred in their sleep but did not wake. Her movements were calm, yet her face was pale. She knew what those lights meant. How many? She whispered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Too many. His soldier's instincts screamed at him to prepare. He checked the rifle, loaded the magazines, and placed a knife at his side. His outpost had been built for communication, not for defense. Thin walls, old metal doors, a heater that hummed louder than his own heartbeat. Against raiders, it was nothing more than a shell. Still, he refused to abandon it. Lyra walked to him. Her steps were soft, but her voice carried strength. You could send us away. If we are not here, maybe they will not fight you. Daniel turned sharply. No, they would kill you before you reached the rocks. And they would still burn this place for sport. She studied him for a long moment. Then you will stand with us? Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle. I don't have a choice anymore. For the first time that night, a flicker of something crossed her face. Not sorrow, not fear, but trust. The torches drew closer, forming lines in the storm. Daniel counted at least a dozen figures, maybe more. Shadows moved with strange weapons, their laughter carrying on the wind. These were not soldiers. These were predators. They'll test the door first, Daniel muttered. He pointed to a corner. Stay with the children. Keep them quiet. If they get inside, you run. Don't wait for me. Lyra's hand touched his arm. Do not speak of running. You are not alone now. Her words struck him harder than he expected. He gave a sharp nod, then pulled the heavy door lock tight. His heart thudded like a war drum. Moments later, the first blow hit the outpost. A metal pipe smashed against the door. Then another. Voices shouted, harsh and cruel. Open up, human, one voice roared. We know what you hide. Daniel stood still, his back to the door, breathing slow and steady. He did not answer. Another strike rattled the hinges. Then laughter. We'll burn you out! The children stirred at the noise, whimpering. Lyra pressed her hand over their mouths gently, her eyes fierce. Daniel raised his rifle. Not tonight, he muttered. The door shuddered again, and then silence. For a heartbeat, the storm itself seemed to pause. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. Through the crack of the window, he saw them spreading out, circling the outpost. They were not impatient. They were hunters. Suddenly, glass shattered. A raider's arm reached through the side window, grasping wildly. Daniel spun and fired. The blast echoed through the small room. The hand disappeared, leaving behind only smoke and screams. The children cried out in fear, but Lyra held them close. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly. He had drawn blood, and now there would be no turning back. More will come, Lyra whispered. I know, Daniel said, reloading. Outside, the torches moved faster now. Shadows pressed closer. One raider hurled a flaming bottle against the wall, fire splashing across the metal. The outpost hissed and groaned. Daniel's jaw clenched. He had been alone for so long, fighting only for himself. Now he fought for lives smaller than his own. The weight of it was crushing, and yet strangely it gave him strength. As the raiders regrouped, Daniel glanced at Lyra. She was kneeling beside her children, whispering soft words in her alien tongue. Her eyes lifted and met his. For the first time, he saw not only fear but fire. She would not let her children die tonight, and neither would he. The storm outside raged. The raiders screamed, and inside the small outpost, a human soldier and an alien widow prepared for war, because survival was no longer enough. Tonight they would fight for a future. The outpost groaned as the storm screamed against its walls, but the greater noise came from the raiders outside. They howled like wolves circling, striking metal, laughing as if the night belonged to them. Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle. His pulse was steady, his eyes sharp. He had fought before in deserts and cities, but this fight was different. This time children slept only a few feet behind him. This time he had something more than duty to protect. The first real attack came fast. The raiders rushed the door with a heavy beam, slamming it again and again. Each strike shook the frame, dust falling from the ceiling. The children whimpered, Lyra holding them tighter. Daniel aimed at the crack in the window. Shadows appeared. He fired. One raider fell, a torch rolling from his hand into the snow. Another shouted in rage, returning fire with a crude weapon that sparked against the wall. Stay down, Daniel barked. Lyra covered her children, shielding them with her own body. Her eyes never left him, full of fear but also something more, belief. The raiders struck again. The door bent inward, the hinges screaming. Daniel grabbed a steel bar from the supply rack and forced it across the frame, locking it tight. They'll break through soon, Lyra whispered. Then we'll make them regret it, Daniel said. Minutes crawled by like hours. Shadows pressed against every side of the outpost. Raiders tested the walls, hammered the door, shouted threats. The storm gave them cover, but Daniel's soldier instincts read every move. A sudden smash of glass, another window shattered. A raider leapt through with a blade raised high. Daniel fired before the man's feet even touched the floor. The raider collapsed, the blade clattering across the metal. But others followed. Another figure forced itself halfway through the window. Daniel dropped his rifle, grabbed the knife at his belt, and drove it forward. The scream was short, cut off by the storm. Blood stained the floor. The heater hissed, struggling against the cold. The children whimpered louder. Daniel looked at Lyra. Take them to the back room now. She hesitated, then obeyed, carrying her children into the small storage chamber. Daniel was alone now with the storm, the fire, and the enemy. The raiders' voices rose in anger. Human, we will tear you apart. Daniel's lips curled into a grim smile. Come and try. They did. The door burst inward with a final crash. Wood splinters and metal shards flying. 3 raiders stormed inside at once, their eyes wild, their weapons raised. Daniel fired, each shot precise. The first fell instantly. The second staggered but lunged forward, forcing Daniel into hand-to-hand combat. The knife flashed. Daniel shoved, twisted, and the man dropped. The third raider swung a heavy club, striking Daniel's shoulder hard. Pain exploded, but Daniel refused to fall. He slammed his rifle's butt into the raider's face, dropping him into silence. Breathing hard, Daniel backed against the heater, chest burning with pain. His shoulder throbbed, but he stayed on his feet. Then, quiet. The raiders pulled back, regrouping outside. Their voices argued in the storm, angry and desperate. Daniel leaned against the wall, sweat mixing with cold air. His shoulder ached, his hands stained with blood. The door was gone. The outpost stood open to the night. He glanced at the storage room. Lyra's eyes met his through the crack in the door. She had not left, not even hidden fully. She watched him, ready to fight if he fell. For the first time, Daniel realized she was not as fragile as she seemed. There was iron in her spirit. "They'll come again," Daniel muttered. Lyra stepped out slowly, the children clutching her skirt. Her voice was calm, though her face was pale. "Then we will stand again." Daniel looked at her, at the widow who had knocked on his door with nothing but fear and hope, and something shifted deep inside him. He was no longer just a soldier defending a lonely outpost. He was part of something bigger now. The storm howled louder. The torches outside burned brighter. And Daniel knew the night was far from over. The storm did not stop. Snow and dust swirled through the broken doorway, coating the floor in white. The heater hissed weakly, trying to fight the cold. Daniel stood in the wreckage, his shoulder aching, his rifle heavy in his hands. Blood marked the ground where raiders had fallen, but outside their torches still burned. The fight was not finished. Lyra stepped forward carefully. Her children pressed against her legs. She studied Daniel with sharp eyes, not as a stranger anymore, but as someone who now shared his battle. "They will come again," she said softly, "but they will not expect resistance. Not like this." Daniel glanced at her, surprised at the fire in her voice. "You've seen them before." She nodded, her jaw tight. "They came to our village many times. They take food, weapons, people. My husband fought, but..." Her voice broke. She drew a deep breath and steadied herself. "They killed him in front of us." Daniel lowered his eyes for a moment. Loss was a wound he understood too well. He didn't press her for more. Instead, he checked his rifle and said, "Then tonight they'll learn we aren't easy prey." For the first time, Lyra's lips curved into the smallest smile. "We," she repeated. Minutes passed like hours. The storm roared, covering the sound of the raiders regrouping. Daniel set traps near the doorway. Wires tied to fuel cans, broken glass spread across the floor. Crude defenses, but better than nothing. Lyra stayed close, helping in silence. When Daniel tore fabric to bind his shoulder, she reached for it and tied the knot herself, her hands firm but gentle. He tried to thank her, but the words stuck in his throat. She spoke first. "When you opened the door to us, you did not hesitate. You had every reason to turn us away, but you didn't." Daniel shrugged, trying to keep his voice flat. It didn't feel like a choice. Her eyes softened. "That is why I came to you, human. Because you would not close the door." The children stirred, frightened by the noise outside. Lyra knelt beside them, whispering soft words in her alien tongue. Daniel listened, though he didn't understand the language. It was the tone, calm, warm, protective, that reached him. He felt something shift inside. For so long he had lived only for survival, only for himself. But hearing her voice, seeing those children, he realized he was no longer alone. And strangely, he didn't want to be. Suddenly, the torches outside moved again. Shadows gathered. A horn blew. Deep, sharp, a call to charge. Daniel raised his rifle, his jaw tight. "They're coming." The raiders stormed forward, shouting, their weapons glinting in the firelight. Daniel fired first. One fell, then another. The traps exploded as raiders stepped on wires, fire bursting across the snow. Screams filled the storm, but more came. Always more. Daniel's rifle clicked empty. He pulled his knife and braced himself as 2 raiders charged through the door. Before he could strike, Lyra moved. She grabbed a metal pole from the wreckage and swung hard. The raider fell back stunned. Her children cried out, but her eyes blazed with fury. Daniel finished the second raider with his blade, then looked at her in shock. She was breathing hard, but she stood tall, the pole firm in her grip. "You fight," Daniel said. "I survive," she answered. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked. Two worlds, two lives, yet standing together as if they had always been meant to. The battle raged until the raiders finally pulled back again, leaving bodies in the snow. Silence returned, broken only by the storm and the crackle of flames. Daniel lowered his weapon, chest heaving, and looked at Lyra. She dropped the pole, trembling now that the fight was over. But she did not fall. Daniel stepped closer. "You're stronger than you look." Her voice was low but fierce. "A mother must be." Daniel looked at the children, wide-eyed, clutching each other, and then back at her. Something inside him shifted deeper, heavier. This was no longer just a night to survive. It was a life he was being pulled into. A life he wasn't sure he deserved, but one he couldn't walk away from. And in that moment, Daniel realized the raiders weren't the only danger. The greater danger was the feeling growing inside his chest, something far harder to fight. The storm had not ended, but the world outside the outpost had changed. Smoke rose from burning torches mixing with snow and ash. Bodies lay scattered in the drifts, but the raiders were not finished. Daniel knew this silence. It was the pause before the storm struck harder. He reloaded his rifle with shaking hands. His shoulder burned with pain, but his mind was sharp. He had fought too many battles to think it was over. Raiders never stopped until one side was dead. Behind him, Lyra wrapped her children in blankets. Their eyes were wide, their small bodies trembling. Yet even in fear, they did not cry loudly. They trusted their mother's calm voice, the way she whispered promises that Daniel did not understand. Finally, she looked up. "They will try to burn us out." Daniel frowned. "How do you know?" "Because that is what they did to my village," she answered. Her voice was flat, heavy with memory. "They don't fight fair. They don't want only to kill. They want to destroy everything that gives hope." As if to prove her words true, a sudden glow lit the snow outside. Flames. Raiders carried burning barrels toward the outpost. "They'll torch the place," Daniel muttered. He moved fast, grabbing the last water drums, pouring them across the doorway. It would not be enough. The old metal walls groaned, too thin to survive a full blaze. The children whimpered. Lyra pulled them close, but her eyes stayed on Daniel. "If the fire spreads, there is no escape." Daniel froze. He wanted to deny it, but she was right. They were cornered. The raiders began their chant, voices deep and cruel. Fire spread across the snow, shadows dancing like demons in the storm. Daniel gritted his teeth. He had one choice: to fight outside before the outpost turned into a cage. He turned to Lyra. "Stay here. Barricade the back room. Don't open the door unless I return." Her face tightened. "You can't face them alone. I've done it before. But this time," she said firmly, "you are not alone." Daniel stared at her. She held his gaze without fear. For a moment he wanted to argue, but something in her eyes stopped him. Strength, defiance, and something else, a bond that had been forged in fire and blood. "All right," he said at last. "Then we fight together." The door was gone, only a broken frame left. Daniel stepped out into the storm, rifle ready, Lyra beside him gripping the metal pole she had used before. The raiders roared when they saw them, man and widow standing side by side in the firelight. The first wave came fast. Daniel fired, each shot cutting down a shadow. Lyra struck the raider who slipped past him, the pole smashing into his jaw with bone-breaking force. But the flames grew closer, licking at the outpost walls. Smoke stung their eyes. Heat pressed against their skin. Daniel coughed, chest burning. He grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her back. "We can't hold the doorway. We'll choke inside. Then we move," she shouted. Together they pushed through the storm, circling the outpost. Raiders shouted, surprised at their charge. Daniel's rifle cracked again and again, the flash lighting his face. Lyra fought like a cornered lioness, every strike for her children. For a few moments, Daniel forgot the pain in his shoulder, forgot the cold and fire. There was only the rhythm of survival. Strike, breathe, protect, endure. Finally, the raiders pulled back once more. Their leader shouted orders in a guttural tongue, frustrated by the resistance. They had not expected prey to fight like this. Daniel leaned against the wall, panting, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Lyra stood beside him, her hair wild, her eyes blazing. He looked at her, truly looked, and realized she was no longer just a widow at his door. She was a fighter, a survivor, a partner in battle. Why me? He asked suddenly. Why did you choose my outpost? My door? Lyra's gaze did not waver. Because I saw something in you that night in the village. You gave food to a child when no one else would. I knew then, you would not let my children die. Daniel swallowed hard. His heart pounded louder than the storm. He wanted to deny it, to push her words away. But deep inside, he knew she was right. And in that moment, as the fire burned and raiders regrouped, Daniel realized something terrifying. He was no longer fighting only for survival. He was fighting for them, for her, for the children, and he would not stop. The storm began to fade, but the danger only grew. Outside the outpost, the raiders gathered for one final charge. Their leader raised a curved blade, his torch casting firelight across the snow. His voice roared above the wind, promising blood. Daniel stood in the ruins of the doorway, rifle heavy in his hands, his shoulders screaming with pain. His body begged him to stop, but his heart refused. Behind him were Lyra and her children. There was no retreat, no surrender. Tonight would end in victory or in death. Lyra came to his side, gripping her metal pole. Her hair whipped in the wind, her eyes glowing with fierce resolve. They will not stop, she said. Daniel gave a tight nod. Neither will we. The raiders surged forward, a tide of shadows and fire. Daniel fired, the rifle cracking in the night. Each shot dropped an enemy, but still they came. His magazine emptied. He drew his knife, teeth clenched. A raider lunged, blade flashing. Daniel met him head-on, steel against steel. The impact jarred his bones. But he shoved the raider back and struck again. Blood splashed across the snow. Another raider leapt past him, charging for the storage room. Lyra moved like lightning, slamming her pole into his ribs. He fell hard, choking, and she finished him with a final blow. Her children cried out from the shadows but stayed hidden, trusting her. The leader entered the fight. He was larger than the others, scarred from old battles, his eyes burning with hatred. His curved blade gleamed in the firelight as he stepped toward Daniel. You will die, human, the leader growled. Daniel raised his knife, his body trembling but his voice steady. Maybe, but not tonight. They clashed. The leader swung with brutal strength, forcing Daniel back. Sparks flew as steel met steel. Daniel's muscles screamed, his injured shoulder nearly giving way. The leader's blade cut across his arm, blood running hot. Daniel staggered, nearly falling. The raider raised his blade for the killing strike. But then, Lyra's cry split the storm. She struck from the side, her pole smashing into the leader's ribs. He roared in pain, turning toward her. Lyra, no! Daniel shouted. The leader swung at her, but Daniel lunged, throwing his whole weight forward. His knife sank deep into the raider's chest. The leader's eyes widened, rage turning to shock. He fell to the snow with a final gasp. For a moment, the battlefield froze. The remaining raiders stared at their fallen leader. Their chants faltered, their courage breaking. Then, without another word, they fled, torches scattering into the night, swallowed by the storm. Silence. Daniel collapsed to one knee, breathing hard, his knife slipping from his hand. His body shook with exhaustion. Blood dripped from his arm, but he was alive. Lyra dropped her weapon and rushed to him. She knelt, her hands steady as she pressed cloth against his wound. Her children peeked out wide-eyed, clinging to each other. You're hurt? She whispered. Daniel gave a weak smile. Not dead. That's what matters. Her eyes shone not with fear now, but with relief. She pressed her forehead against his, a gesture from her people, a silent bond of gratitude. Because of you, she said softly. My children live. Daniel swallowed hard. He looked at the children, at their small faces, then back at Lyra. Something inside him broke open, the wall he had built around his heart for years. I didn't save them alone, he said quietly. We did this together. The storm faded into calm. The first light of dawn touched the horizon, painting the snow in pale gold. Smoke rose from the battlefield, but inside the outpost warmth returned. Lyra tucked her children into blankets, then sat beside Daniel. For the first time, her shoulders eased. She no longer looked like a widow running from death. She looked like a woman who had found a place to stand again. Daniel leaned back against the wall, exhausted but alive. He watched her, the children, the small fire that still burned. His heart was heavy with the weight of what had happened, but also strangely light with something new. He had opened his door to a stranger. Now, He realized he had opened it to a family. Lyra touched his hand gently, her voice a whisper. "You are human, and now you are ours." Daniel closed his eyes, letting the warmth of her words sink into him. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged. And in the quiet dawn, with an alien widow at his side and her children safe, Daniel knew the truth. This was not the end. It was the beginning.